Hey guys, I just wanted to talk about first multidimensional arrays and this Battleship game I made to get you guys used to the whole indexing of multidimensional arrays. So a multidimensional array is an array of arrays or array of arrays and so on. Basically in my board class, I create a 2D char array called board, and it holds basically if I'm just looking at the water, it's a W. If I miss an enemy, it's an O, and if I hit an enemy, it's an X. So it's a 2D char array. Now, what board really is it is a char array. So the indexes of the char array are 0 through 5. I have 5 char arrays in my char array. Or I guess 6, because it's going 0 through 5. So if we look down the rows, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are my indexes of my individual arrays. And the thing I have in my array of arrays at the 0th index is this array with these columns. These indexes. So going down, we've got my actual arrays inside my array of arrays. These are the indexes for those, and these are the indexes for the individual arrays, like the char arrays. Hopefully that made some sense. Anyway, so the point of this game is to get used to how you index different elements in it. You don't really need to fully be thinking that it's an array of arrays all the time. Usually people just imagine it looking like this, where the first thing you put in is the row and the second thing you put in is the column. So in this case, if I want to guess, let's say I want to look at something close to the middle. So the thing, why don't we do 2, 3? So if I want to get that guy, I'd do board 2 to select my row and 3 to select my column, and I'll see if I hit anything. I didn't. I'm pretty terrible at hitting these things. I made a video before and it was like trying to get the X, and it took minutes to do so, so I deleted it. Anyway, so quickly I'll try this again. So I'll be doing the array at index 4, and in that array I will check, say, index 1, and that would be this guy. So row 4 column 1, or the array at index 4 and the index 1 of that particular array. And I hit something. That was very lucky. And so I happen to know with my game that there should be something up, down, left, or right. So I could try, let's say I want to check this guy, see if it was going up like that. So I'd check 3, 1. So I'd type in board, the name of my array, and then 3 to get the row, and then 1 to get the column, or I'm going to mess with the array at the index 3, and then the element at index 1 of that particular array. And so that's going well. And then let's see if I can win it. I'll try and do board 2, 1. I don't miss that one. So it's got to be at board 5, 1. So the 5th row and column 1. And then we win. And so that's the game. Notice the whole idea is this is how you would write that particular, or how you'd access that particular element if you were coding. So this is meant to get you familiar with that. And so let's talk about how this thing actually works. So it's got some final variables. They're static and final. Final just means you can't change it afterwards, but I could always go and make my board size 8, and then if I ran it, it would be 8 by 8. But not very important. I've decided that my ship size is my board size divided by 2, and then the character I use to represent the water is a W. So I've got all these constants. The big important thing that I need to do this is my board. My board represents what the user sees at a given point. The ship is a bunch of 2D coordinates. So it's the ship size. So it's ship size down. In this case, it would be 3. So each ship takes up 3 spaces, and each piece of the ship has an X and a Y coordinate, or a row and a column. So that's why it's size 2 here. Num hits just calculates how many times we've hit the thing, because it's an easy way to decide if you've won or not. All right, and then when you create a board, what it does is, this is a very common thing for multivariable arrays. You got a for loop inside a for loop. So for every row in your 2D array, and for every column in that way you're going to hit every element. Set the board at row R and column C to the water characters. So set them all W. Notice that it all started with all W's. And then the next thing it calls in the constructor is set ship, which I made this method. It kind of randomly places a ship. So we create our random object. This is just another way of doing random integers nicely. I like it better than math.random. The only reason I taught you math.random is because it was on the AP exam. Though it's useful to know too. Anyway, so if a random number between 0 and 1 is equal to 1, so you got a 1 in 2 chance, so it's like I flipped a coin, it'll align the ship vertically. And so you can give it an X start of anywhere on the board, because your X start doesn't matter, but your Y start does, because you don't want it to go off the edge of it. And if it's 3 long, you got to make sure of that. So this just makes sure that the first Y is not going to go off the edge of the board. And then basically you do your X and Y coordinates. Notice you got your Y start that starts at 0, and then it'd be Y start plus 1. So basically, let's say I started at 1, 1. The next one would be at 2, 1, and then the next one would be at 3, 1. So my 2D array would look like, if it started at 1, 1, it would be 1, 1, 2, 1, oops, 3, 1. So that'd be my array. The X and Y, or sorry, the row and column of my first entry, the row and column of my second entry, and the row and column of my third entry. So that's it. Otherwise, if I didn't randomly roll a 1, if I didn't flip heads, I'm going to line the ship horizontally. And so it's basically exactly the same idea, only this time your Y thing doesn't matter, because it can be in any of the rows, and it just picks a starting point and then moves to the side. This get digits thing is just an easy way to do this part here. I really didn't need to make it a method. I really could have just made it a string, but it's a quick and easy method to make this top piece. So every time I want to show the board, I print out get digits board size, which is just this top line right here, including the space. Here's where the space is, and then the rest of it is just these numbers. So yeah, so that gets my top line. And then again, we've got sort of a nested for loop, a for loop inside a for loop. So for every row, first thing we do is we print out the row's index. So we're starting at 0, so that prints out the 0, and then the 1, and all that. And then for every column in that row, we're going to print out what the board says at that row in that column. So right now it's a bunch of W's with the odd O and X. And then Once we're done a particular column, notice this is system.out.print, not system.out.println. So it continues along the same line. But then once we're done a full row, we do a print line to go on to the next line. And then we also have a method called guess, which basically checks that it's in bounds. If you give it crazy numbers that don't fit on the board, it'll just say that's not valid coordinates and not change anything. If it checks the board at those coordinates and it's not a water character, not an unpicked character, it'll say you've already picked that. Otherwise, if X and Y is a hit, it's one of the ones where your ship's at, it increases the number of hits. And in this new hit thing here, I think it also sets it to be an X if it is a hit. Otherwise, it sets it to an O, which is a miss. We've got this one thing, which is nice and easy. It just says if num hits is greater than or equal to ship size, that means you've sunk the ship, you've gotten it all. And then this guy right here, this is checking the new hit. So you give it an X and Y coordinate. And so for I equals, so it iterates along the ship size and basically checks every row to see if the X and Y match up with one of the rows. Though X and Y might not be the best examples. I probably should have called it R and C, row and column, because X is the row and Y is the column. Anyway, so if it matches up with one of the things on the ship, it sets it to an X and returns true, so it can up the number of hits. Anyway, sort of a wonky way to do it, but that's how I did it. And then the main method, you just create a new board, you create a scanner, and then while you haven't won, you show the board every round, and then you tell them to type in your X coordinates, basically just prompt them to type in like board 1, 2, or whatever. And then this try catch thing, basically if this throws an error, because it's trying to parse an integer and it's not possible, it'll catch it and say it's not the right format. So yeah, if they screwed it up and there's not numbers where there's supposed to be numbers, it would throw an error, but this catches it and just tells them like, hey, you did it wrong. But this is a nice little trick. It's non-trivial to figure out. This is a bunch of stuff you haven't seen. Some of it you have. I mean, we're just using a scanner here. So next line gets the next full line of text that someone types. Dot trim gets rid of any leading or following white space. So if they did a bunch of spaces before writing board or a bunch after, that'll just delete those because that might screw stuff up. And then dot split is kind of cool because it takes a string and basically chops it up at certain points you're looking for. And what I'm looking for is starting open brackets, open square brackets. So it basically splits the string into an array of strings, and the chopping points, the cutting points are open square brackets. Yeah. And so then we just get the X coordinate and the Y coordinate from that, starting from, anyway, not important, but this gets the X and Y coordinate. And then we did our guess method, which we saw in the other thing, X and Y, and it just keeps doing it again and again until finally you win, which should happen eventually. And then it shows the board and says you win and you're done. And that is how it works. Hopefully this was interesting. Sorry it was a little long. Thanks for listening.